Hey everyone, it's Kevin in Texas wishing you well whenever and wherever you're at. Today I'm here to talk about one of my favorite topics, conference realignment, specifically SEC conference realignment. In the summer of 2021, the SEC shook up the world when they announced that Texas and Oklahoma would be joining the conference by 2025 at the latest. And almost immediately after that news broke, people were asking, okay, how is this new SEC going to look? How are they going to align themselves? Now, having taken a look at all of those different ideas, today I'll be reviewing the top 3 plans for SEC conference realignment. And after a quick rundown of the strengths and weaknesses of each of those plans, at the very end, I'll give you my opinion of what I think is the best direction for the SEC to go. The first plan that I've seen is the classic 2-divisional split. And this is something that the SEC already employs right now, a West and an East division. Now, post Texas and OU coming into the conference, the West and East divisions are going to look a little bit different. And as you can see on the screen, these divisions are very compact, they're very tight, they are very logical. Starting in the West, we have Arkansas, LSU, Mississippi, Mississippi State, Missouri, Oklahoma, Texas, and Texas A&M. On the eastern half, we have Alabama, Auburn, Georgia, Florida, Kentucky, South Carolina, Tennessee, and Vanderbilt. Now, in this kind of 2-divisional alignment, there are a lot of pros that we can discuss. There's a lot of good positive aspects to this plan. The first is the compact and logical geography. In this kind of setup, most of your divisional opponents are driving distance away. Today, gas prices are soaring. At the time of this recording, gas prices are soaring. And so for college sports, college athletics, it's important to have conferences that are as close together as possible. This SEC divisional alignment keeps geography very tight, very local, very logical, and this will help lower travel costs. You can drive to most of these divisional games within about a day's drive. Also, the setup features more of a classic divisional feel. Since the 1990s, we've become accustomed to 2 divisions in the big-time college football conferences. And this speaks to that. This is a continuation of that classic 2-divisional feel. And in this divisional structure, we see that most of the classic rivalries of college football are maintained. In the West, you have Texas and Arkansas, Texas and Oklahoma, Oklahoma and Missouri, Texas A&M and Texas, Mississippi versus Mississippi State, LSU versus Ole Miss. All those classical rivalries we've become accustomed to over the decades are there. And some of them, of course, being revived, such as Texas versus Arkansas and Texas versus A&M. In the eastern half of this setup, it's much the same. The familiar rivalries we've seen are maintained. Alabama versus Auburn, Georgia versus Florida, Alabama versus Tennessee. So not much changes as far as most of these classic rivalries in the SEC. Finally, we're almost guaranteed a fresh championship game every season. If we go with this bi-divisional arrangement in the SEC, if we continue with having 2 divisions, it looks like we're going to have 9 conference games each year. And in that split, we would have 7 divisional games plus 2 cross-divisional games. Mathematically, this means that it's very likely that our SEC title game is going to be a fresh matchup. It will not be a repeat performance from earlier in the regular season. Now, there are some cons in this setup as well. There are some negatives. The first negative is that all teams will not be able to play each other regularly. Some people believe this is a big deal. Some people want to see all 16 teams of the new SEC play each other every 2, 3, or 4 years. In this 2-divisional setup, that's going to be a near impossibility. Another negative is that a few of these rivalries are going to have to be adjusted. And LSU comes to mind when I say that. Currently, LSU has some nice rivalries with both Florida and Alabama. And in this new setup, those rivalries would not automatically exist. Now, there is a way around this. Because each team has 7 divisional games, they will have 2 cross-divisional games. And I would recommend that under this arrangement, the SEC allow each team to schedule series opponents with those cross-divisional teams. So, for example, if LSU wants to continue the Florida rivalry every season, LSU and Florida can agree to play every season in a series format. They would be a permanent cross-division opponent for one another. And if LSU wants to go full on, they can do the same with Alabama. Those 2 schools can agree to continue playing one another each season as permanent cross-divisional opponents. Now, other schools may opt not to do that, or LSU in this example may opt to only play one of those schools regularly. If that's the decision they make and they do not want a permanent cross-division opponent, those teams can just go to a randomized cross-divisional opponent instead. Now, the second option that I've seen mentioned quite a bit in college football forums is the pod option. And I know a lot of people hate the word pods. It reminds them of something like an egg a monster will spawn from. And I kind of agree. I don't think that's a very cool divisional descriptor. But it is what it is. A lot of people like the idea of having 4 4-team divisions instead of 2 8-team divisions. They like the idea of having 4 pods. And in this setup, there are some pros that we can discuss. Now, in my example here, I've created 4 pods for the new SEC, and they are as follows. The Western Division, consisting of Arkansas, Oklahoma, Texas, and Missouri. The East, with Georgia, Florida, Kentucky, and South Carolina. The Central with Alabama, Auburn, Tennessee, and Vanderbilt. And the South with LSU, Ole Miss, Mississippi State, A&M. Now, clearly, you can rearrange your 4 pods however you like. I'm just listing out what I think is the most logical arrangement in my mind. However you arrange them, there are some serious strengths to this idea of 4 pods. The first strength is a lot of scheduling flexibility. Because the only permanent opponents you would have in this setup would be your 3 pod mates, your 3 division opponents. And then you would have 6 rotating games on top of that. So outside of those 3 divisional opponents, you could literally play anybody else in the conference. And a lot of people like that idea. So in this setup, all teams will play each other much more frequently. This also opens the door for an expanded SEC playoff. We've seen the discussions with the quote-unquote scheduling alliance trying to essentially block out the SEC as much as possible. Some people believe the SEC will counter by saying, okay, we're just going to have our own playoff, and the SEC champion will be the national champion. If that's the decision the conference wants to go towards, the 4-divisional setup is probably going to be a necessity. And in that setup, you would have each division champion making the playoffs each year. So you'd have a 4-seeded playoff. There are some negatives to the pod setup, and the first and the most obvious is divisional wonkiness. Trying to split the SEC into 4 4-team divisions as it stands now, it feels like there's always going to be an odd man out. It feels like there's always going to be one of these divisions that doesn't exactly jibe the way it should. And if you take some time and create your own, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. Another negative to this arrangement, increased travel costs. Because you only have 3 divisional opponents, you then have 6 rotating opponents, and those other teams could be located anywhere in the SEC. that means the travel costs are going to increase. Now, there's a third option I've seen mentioned recently, and that is the idea of eliminating divisions altogether. And taking a look at this kind of format, you see there is support for it. There are some serious advantages to this format. The first, again, being increased schedule flexibility. Because outside your permanent rivals, you literally can play anyone else in the conference. In this setup, most of the classic rivalries will be protected because you're just, again, focusing on each school's top 3 rivals. This also opens the door for that expanded SEC playoff, where the top 4 seeds would advance to the SEC playoff. The negatives for the no divisional arrangement: no real conference cohesion. In this kind of style of conference realignment, you just have lists of teams playing one another. Finally, the last negative to this setup: the stakes are much lower. In the no division scheme, the stakes overall are much lower. There's no real goal to win your division because there are no divisions to win. There's no championship goals, really. It's just about, okay, can I get into the top 4 to make it to the playoff? And I think that takes a little bit of excitement away from the game. So which one do you like better? Well, I'll tell you which one I like better. That is option number 1. I love the classical West-East divisional split. This new 16-team SEC is a very powerful league. It is the first true Superconference in existence. And this divisional alignment maximizes those strengths. We see 2 extremely strong divisions right here before us. And each and every week, you're going to have outstanding matchups from each division. As a college football fan, this is something I would love to see. This is something I would tune in for each and every Saturday. And to be honest, other conferences that are talking about doing away with divisions are suffering from one of 2 problems. Number 1, those other leagues either have divisions that are severely imbalanced, or number 2, they have a product that just isn't very exciting to watch. And so they're trying to do something to shake things up and gain some viewers. The new SEC won't have to do any of that. In fact, I think the best strategy is to go with what works, to maximize the strength of your product, to have 2 super powerful divisions, and to make this a must-see TV league each and every week. As always, I'd love to hear what you think. Feel free to write in your comments below your thoughts about how the new SEC should align themselves. In the meantime, I hope you're doing great whenever and wherever you're at, and I say God bless each and every one of you. Talk to you later. Bye.